I did not even make it to the chair before he ended us. A bell chimed, low jazz hummed, and the smell of sugar and scorched espresso floated under the cafe's skylight. Adrian did not stand. He did not smile. He just nudged a velvet ring box across the marble like a pawn on a chessboard and said, very gently, that he could not marry me. 7 plain words, a quiet execution. I slipped off what used to be my forever and laid it on the table between us like a truce flag. Then I walked out, past the plates, past the soft gasps, past the story I thought I was living. By nightfall, my things were lined up like evidence in labeled suitcases. By sunrise, I was on a stranger's pull-out sofa, staring at a cracked ceiling and counting the ways my life had vanished in a single afternoon. I did not know it yet, but the road out of that ruin bent toward a locked door on a cliff, and the man behind it, a man the world had mistaken for finished. The cafe in Harborview had always looked like a postcard, big windows, leaf-shadowed light, cups that chimed when they touched saucers. I had picked it because it felt like neutral ground. No dress racks, no guest lists, no spray of well-meaning questions about centerpieces and vows. Just coffee and the steadying ritual of talking like grown people. Adrian was early. That should have been my first warning. He did not do early. He did, however, do immaculate. Immaculate shirt, immaculate watch, immaculate expression, calm as if he were about to present slides to a board. "We need to talk," he said, before I even sat. His voice had that smoothness I had learned to fear, the smoothness that meant the conclusion had been decided long before I arrived. "What's going on?" I managed, fingers finding the seam in my coat pocket. "If this is about the caterer, they can—" "This is not about the caterer," he said softly. Then the velvet box appeared, not like a gift, but like a return. "I cannot marry you, Nora." My name in his mouth sounded like a closing door. For a heartbeat, the cafe fell away. No cups, no light, no piano loop of old jazz, just the clean slice of those words and the strange, empty quiet they left behind. I sat anyway, because my knees remembered their training. I nodded because my face remembered its manners. "Is there someone else?" I asked, even though the answer had already set up camp behind his eyes. "We are headed in different directions," he said. "I have made connections, important ones." A pause that felt like a bow. Sienna Valmont and I are aligned in ways I did not see before. That name clanged. Sienna Valmont, daughter of Victor Valmont, the rainmaker, with a portfolio fat enough to tilt any table, the kind of name that opened the best doors and shut all the others. "You are leaving me for her," I said. It was not a question. "It is not like that." Of course it was. "You deserve someone simpler." There it was, the blade disguised as mercy. Simpler, as in smaller, as in less. "Also," he added, "the ring. It is a family piece. My grandmother would be devastated." I finished for him. My hands knew the choreography. Twist, lift, a soft pull. The diamond was warm from my skin. Funny, the things that keep warmth when everything else goes cold. "Thank you for telling me," I said, because I had been raised by a woman who taught me that leaving with your chin up is a kind of armor. I placed the ring between us, stood, and walked. Past a couple sharing a dessert the color of moons. Past a barista who looked like she wanted to call after me. Past the door that sighed when it closed, and the street that greeted me with ordinary sunlight, rude in its indifference. The apartment we shared had been stripped of our plural. My dresses hung in garment bags by the door. My books were rubber-banded into careful stacks. Toiletries nested in a shoebox labeled in a tight, unfamiliar hand. Not Adrian, too thoughtful. This had the clean efficiency of someone who had spent a lifetime arranging messes that were not hers. His mother. I sat on the floor beside the suitcases and let the silence do its work. The wall clock marked out a rhythm I did not recognize. I tried my bank app. What looked back at me barely cleared $100. The wedding fund had been emptied into non-refundable deposits and monogrammed nonsense. My old studio lease had gone to a nursing student who cried when I handed her the keys. The future I had planned was a neat diagram of vanished arrows. I did the bravest thing I have ever done. I called my foster mom. Maribel Ortiz, she answered on the third ring, her voice still warm, still steady, still able to stitch terrified pieces together with nothing more than tone. Mi niña, I was just about to text you about those boots. Did you get them? I could not make words. The sob came like a body remembering how to breathe after too long underwater. Oh, baby, she said, all business now. Get in the car. I am putting the kettle on. That ratty plaid blanket is clean and so is the pullout. You are not alone. Do you hear me? You are not alone. An hour later, I was under that blanket, peppermint steam fogging my glasses, Maribel's palm on my hair the way it had been when I was 13, and heart tired from another bad placement. She did not ask for the autopsy of the relationship. She did not say I told you so, even though she could have. She just made soup and left the bathroom light on and put her old radio on the low station that plays nothing but piano at night. I did not sleep. I counted the freckles in the ceiling paint and listened to the house settle and waited for the ache to quiet. It did not. But at dawn, it changed shape. Shame is heavy, but it has edges you can pick up. By noon, I was back in scrubs on the surgical floor, buttressed by routine. Smiles, charting, checklists, 1,000 forms of competence that asked for my hands and not my history. People asked about the wedding. I lied with a practiced ease that scared me. Postponed, vendor delays, a business trip. All of it sounded like sentences I had heard other women use, the soft padding wrapped around a truth too sharp to carry bare. The next day I did it again, and the next. On the third afternoon, while I was flushing a central line in room 8, Rachel, our charge nurse, leaned in like a conspirator in a cartoon. You still hunting for a miracle out of here? She asked, eyebrows doing acrobatics. I am hunting for a functioning coffee machine, I said. That I cannot do. But she flashed a white card with a name written in an elegant hand. I can offer you an exit door. I stared. What kind of door? Private care, live-in, big money, big house. One patient, neuro rehab. The last nurse fled after 2 weeks, said he was a hurricane in a chair. You have stubborn stitched into your spine, Bennett. That is exactly the material this job requires. I laughed because it sounded like a dare. I am not a caregiver. I am a nurse. 5 years on trauma and post-op says you can be both, and you like lost causes. I like puzzles, I said. Same thing. She tucked the card in my pocket. Call tonight. If the voice on the other end sounds like someone who ran a war, you have the right number. I held the card in the alley behind Maribel's house just before midnight, breath fogging in the Harborview cold. The name read, Helena Markham, estate manager. The number looked like it belonged to a bank vault. I called anyway. Markham, a voice answered on the second ring, crisp enough to shatter glass. This is Nora Bennett, I said. I was told there is a live-in position. A pause that was all measurement. Are you available for an interview tomorrow at 9 in the morning? Yes, I said, heart tripping. I can be. Bring credentials and references. The address will be texted. Do not be late. The line went dead. The way lines go dead when the person on the other end no longer needs anything from you. By dawn, I was on a short haul to Rainfall Ridge, the green spine that rises inland from the Oregon coast. The rideshare wound us through redwoods and mist and money, gates that opened without being asked, houses with more glass than sense. Then we turned, and the world tilted. The house looked like a cliff had learned to speak steel. Glass walls, black stone, lines so clean you could cut your finger on them. A gate whispered open just for us. The driver let out a low whistle that said, without words, that this was not a place where people like us set anything down. Helena Markham met me with a clipboard and a look that could stop a stampede. She was all tendon and exactness, hair pinned into a twist that would not dare escape. "You are early," she said, not smiling. I did not want to be late. "Wise," she said, already turned toward the corridor. "Follow." The interview ran like a drill. She flipped through my licenses, asked 4 questions with surgical precision, did not waste a syllable. "The position is yours," she concluded, as if the position were a chair and I were the person who had stood up for it last. "Terms, round-the-clock availability, 2 days off per month, no visitors, discretion not optional. You will reside in the second-floor suite adjacent to your patient, meals and lodging included. Salary is $12,000 per month, with a performance bonus tied to milestones. The contract is in this folder. Read it before morning." "Who is the patient?" I asked, voice steadier than I felt. "Mr. Rowan Vale." She said his name without embellishment, but the syllables carried weight. "You will address him as Mr. Vale unless directed otherwise." It meant nothing to me then. It would mean everything soon. That night, I read the contract in a room that smelled like cedar and new money. I signed with a hand that trembled but did not waver. In the morning, Helena walked me down a hallway that absorbed sound and stopped in front of a door that had the gravity of a vault. "You are certain?" she asked, and for the first time, I thought I heard something like concern in her voice. "I am," I said. She knocked twice, did not wait, opened. The room was almost indecent in its beauty. Redwood canopy unfurled beyond a glass wall. Light pooled on pale oak. Everything about the space was designed to make a body feel small. He sat by the window, back to us, a silhouette in a sleek black chair. "Mr. Vale," Helena said, crisp as ever, "your new nurse, Nora Bennett." He did not turn immediately. His fingers tapped the armrest in a slow, impatient rhythm. When he pivoted, the surprise of him knocked the air from me. Not old, not frail, mid-30s, broad shoulders caged by stillness, dark hair cut close, a face more angles than curves, except for the mouth, which looked like it had once been good at smiling. His skin had that thin post-hospital pallor, and the exhaustion in him felt structural, not temporary. He looked at me as if taking my measure were a task with a deadline. "So," he said, voice low as a cello, "they sent me another one." I opened my mouth, but he had already shifted his gaze to Helena. "What is the pool this time? A week? 10 days? Helena did not blink. "I will leave you to get acquainted," she said, and closed us in together. We listened to the silence for a few beats. "I am not here to make bets," I said. "I am here to work." He rolled a foot closer, the chair moving like an animal trained to obey. "And what work do you think is left?" he asked. "Medication, skin checks, spasm management, respiratory metrics, nutrition, coordination with your physiotherapist, pain protocols, sleep hygiene, and whatever else the day demands." "You left out the part where you pretend not to pity me," he said. "I do not have the energy to pretend," I said. He tilted his head, almost curious. "That is new." "Maybe I am," I said. "New." We spent the day in a choreography I could have done in my sleep, but did not dare. He tested every boundary with the casual expertise of someone who had been failed by too many hired strangers. I did not flinch. By dusk, we had established a truce. I would not coddle, he would not lie. As I dimmed the lights, he said to the window, "You did not ask about the accident. I figured you would tell me if you wanted to talk about it." A long pause. Then, backcountry ridge, solo. A bad decision in the wrong snow. I woke up in a helicopter. I have not stood unassisted since. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. "Do not get attached," he said. "I do not do gratitude or friends." "Good," I said. "I do not do illusions." He looked at me like I had tossed a glass of cold water in his face. Then he nodded once, an almost invisible concession, and turned toward the trees. That first night, the wind came up off the ravine and shook the glass. I watched the redwoods argue with the weather and wanted, irrationally, to apologize to them for bringing my mess into their quiet. Somewhere after midnight, the house fell to a hush so complete it felt like pressure on the skin. I should have slept. Instead, I saw it. A white band of light pooling under a door across the hall. The West Wing Gym, Helena's map had called it. The part of the house Rowan did not let staff enter without permission. Curiosity is a bone that aches if you ignore it. I slipped into shoes and crossed the hall. The door gave just enough, and the slit I left showed me the one thing I had decided not to expect. Rowan Vale was standing. Not fluidly, not without help. His hands locked white around parallel bars, his arms doing angry work, sweat beading along his temple. His legs shook in visible protest. But there he was, upright, inching, a man arguing with gravity and refusing to lose. The floor creaked under my foot. He turned. Rage went through his face like a storm. "What are you doing?" he bit out. "I heard a noise," I said, which was true, if incomplete. "Get out," he snapped. "Now." I did not move, not because I am brave, because what I had seen shifted something in me. "Why are you hiding this?" I asked quietly. His jaw clenched until I could hear his teeth. "Because the minute people see progress, they write a miracle script for you and refuse to tear it up. I cannot be that show for them. So you decided to be nothing for them instead," I said. "Silence hurts less than disappointment. I get it. It still starves the same." "You do not get it." "Maybe I do," I said, stepping closer the way you do with a wounded animal, slow, palm open. A future ripped clean out of your hands, an audience that wants you to perform gratitude for what they left you with. I am not here for a performance. I am here for the work. Let me help. "Why?" he demanded. "Why do you care?" "Because I have been thrown away," I said, "and I am still here." He stared at me so long I felt the floor tilt. Then he lowered himself back into the chair with the careful economy of a man who counts pain like currency. "Fine," he said at last. "We do it my way. No one knows, not even Helena. You take orders when I say stop. You do not ask for more than I can give. You do not say the word brave. Are we clear?" "Clear," I said. He nodded once. "Be here at dawn." I left with my heart on a higher shelf than where I had found it. At dawn, the house wore its other face, quiet, monastic, almost kind. I found Rowan already at the bars, hair damp, sleeves shoved to his elbows like he was about to fight someone he respected. He did not look at me when I stepped in beside him. He did not need to. He could hear my breath, mark my weight on the floorboards, file me into the calculus of his balance. "Left foot," he said. "Half." I placed 2 fingers lightly against the inside of his elbow and one against the shoulder blade that cinched when he shifted. "Half," I echoed. He did not want cheers. He wanted a metronome and a witness. So I counted, kept my hand a whisper from him, and did not say a single glorious thing when he dragged a heel forward the length of a credit card. The work lived in his neck, in the tendons that lifted, in the beads of sweat that collected at his jawline. He had been built to move. You could see it, the frame, the way even seated he took up space. This frozen life was not a home he had chosen. It was a room he refused to decorate. "Enough," he said finally, breath scraping. "Chair." We did the drill we would come to know by heart: cool down, skin check, anti-embolism massage, breath work. He taught me without teaching me. I listened like my job depended on it because it did. By 9 in the morning, I had been up 4 hours, washed, fed, charted, and somehow calmer than I had been in weeks. Routine is a rope. It did not last. The house, by late morning, becomes a place people invade. Architects, gardeners, grocers who deliver artisanal objects I refuse to call bread. I was restocking a med cart when I heard a voice in the west sitting room. Male, easy, laced with the dismissive affection of an old friend who has decided he knows your edges better than you do. "Rowan, you look like hell," the voice drawled. "I feel like hell," Rowan returned, and managed, somehow, to make it sound like a courtesy. I carried a tea tray to the doorway because someone had to, and because good eavesdropping requires a prop. The man on the couch wore wealth like a cologne, watch that cost a mortgage, suede loafers in a color I refused to name. Early 40s, Jim handsome, grin tuned for rooms that want to be sold. "This the new one?" he asked when he saw me. "What is she, Helena's niece?" "Nora Bennett," I said, neutral as a gray wall. "Evan Drake," he said. "I am the partner who does not let this place slide off a cliff. Yet," Rowan murmured. Their talk slid fast into a lane I pretend to understand while refusing to learn the jargon. Term sheets, adversarial diligence, board appetite. I tuned out the buzz until one name cut clean through me. Valmont. Evan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes bright with the greed of a plan that thinks it has the high ground. "Laura says her father is ready to push the funds through. We just need the control package transferred to the shell. Valmont Capital carries it to the board, easy in. Then we're not begging the old guard for crumbs. We are the table." Laura, not Sienna. Laura, Sienna's older sister, the one who prefers knives to lipstick. The Valmonts handle power like a family heirloom, passed at dinners, displayed under glass, pointed if necessary. "I will review the documents," Rowan said, voice uncolored. "You have been saying that for weeks," Evan said, still smiling. "If we wait, the window closes." "Then shut it," Rowan said mildly. "Drafts do not walk away if you leave them alone." I was good. I waited until they shifted to a different war before I ghosted away. My hands shook so hard I had to sit on them in my room until the tremor passed. I did not want to care which particular Valmont was threading the wire through Rowan's company. I did not want the Venn diagram in my skull to reveal what it revealed. That the world is so small it can fit your past hurt and your present life into one sentence. I had promised him I would not ask for more than he offered, but I did not promise myself. That night, during cool down, I told him, "Your partner wants to move your decision rights into a shell," I said, voice clinical on purpose. "He is leaning on Valmont leverage." I heard the words control package. He did not look at me. "And the part that is yours in this?" "My ex-fiancé left me for a Valmont daughter," I said. "Different sister, same gravity." I do not know if it matters. But I know what happens when people decide your life would be easier for them if you were edited. He rolled toward the window and watched the redwoods throw dark shapes across the glass. Silence stretched. I let it. "Thank you," he said finally. "I will read what I should have read weeks ago." It did not feel like enough. I wanted him to call his counsel, to fire everyone, to perform a cinematic purge that would burn the rot out of the walls. Instead, he did the slower, harder thing. He asked for the folder, and then he asked for quiet. Helena brought in a tray at dusk and found us in the study at the long table, papers like a second surface, Rowan's hand flat against a page like he could feel a pulse there. She did not ask. She simply refilled the carafe and left us to the work that does not make good television. On the fourth night, just past midnight, my door thudded softly. Rowan in the chair, a folder in his lap, his face carved into decision. "You were right," he said without ceremony. "Valmont Capital is not investing. Evan formed a holding company 2 months ago to carry my decision rights. The transfer language is buried 3 clauses deep and written so prettily you could miss that it takes the spine out of me." His mouth twisted. I almost signed it anyway. You did not, I said. I did not, he agreed. I would like your help to keep it that way. Mine? I asked, in case he had left someone in the hallway. You are the only person in this house who will tell me no, he said. Also, you listen. Listening became our weapon. We pulled contracts apart by their little lies. We called a lawyer Rowan trusted because he had been the one to tell him an early app was garbage when everyone else was clapping. We mapped the who and the when and the how much on a whiteboard until the picture looked like a constellation. When we reached a name that made my stomach flip, Miller, Rowan followed my gaze and then, gently, followed my breath back out of it. We will handle yours when we are done with mine, he said. The plan was a patient thing. Rowan did not know how to make a small entrance, but he knew how to move a room. He would let Evan set the board meeting. He would let Laura think the ink was dry. Then he would show up in the one way none of them expected, on his feet. Not far, he warned, eyes dark with realism. Not for long, just enough to shift oxygen. Enough, I said. Dawn's sessions changed shape. We added canework, tiny bursts of independence measured in heartbeats. He cursed in languages I do not speak. I counted and I lied in the precise way rehab requires. One more when there were 3. Almost when there were miles. On the day of the meeting, Helena knocked just once and then stepped into my suite like a weather report. Car in 15 minutes, she said. Dress like people who intend to be believed. Rowan wore a midnight suit that made the chair look like a temporary stop and not a destiny. He caught me looking and rolled his eyes, which is, in case you are wondering, a very intimate thing to do to someone, because it assumes they will not take offense. You ready? He asked. No, I said, but we are going anyway. The building downtown was an altar to glass and ideas. Heads turned when we crossed the lobby. Cane clicks, my step beside him, a ripple of whisper that felt like weather. Evan sat at the head of the table, handsome and sleek, a man convinced that he tells the story and the story obeys. Laura Valmont wore a suit the color of expensive fog, her mouth an exact line. And at her shoulder, because fate has a rude sense of humor, stood Adrian, polished, smaller, tan a shade that said vacation rather than work. Rowan did not sit at the far end. He walked the room in a slow line, cane, step, breath, the sound of every stubborn morning laying down a beat behind him. He stopped at the head of the table. He did not look at Adrian. He did not look at me. He looked at Evan. This meeting is under my authority, he said, mild as tea. He slid a folder to the center and opened it. And this is what you tried to do. He did not raise his voice. He did not point. He simply labeled the fraud with its real names, clauses that stole instead of safeguarded, emails that turned into confessions if you read them at the right angle, call logs that braided with wire transfers like a proof. Evan's face drained, the way faces do when the person behind them discovers that a mask is a luxury you have to earn. You cannot prove intent, he managed. I do not have to, Rowan said. I only have to prove breach. I already have. Laura rose, a study in poise turned weapon. You do not know who you are trying to embarrass, she said. Rowan smiled. The version of one a glacier makes in spring. I do, he said. A woman who signs her father's name for him, and a partner who sells the long work for the short applause. Adrian shifted but did not speak. He did not meet my eyes. He did not need to. I had nothing for him. Call the vote, Rowan said to council. The hands went up the way hands go up when people know which way the tide is pulling. Evan was relieved of duty. The shell was shelled. The company's spine returned to its body. After, when the room emptied of everyone who had walked in there certain they would win, Rowan let the cane take a little more of his weight and then leaned into the table. You did it, I said, because sometimes the obvious thing is the true thing. We did it, he said, and let his mouth make a shape I would come to hoard, a smile that started in his eyes and tugged the corners up like a secret. We rode back to the house without speaking much. That is another intimacy. Silence that does not ask to be proofread. The redwoods were bluer in the afternoon, the fog off the ravine lifting like a curtain. The house no longer felt like a mausoleum. It felt like a stage we were learning to use for living. That night, he burned rice and swore at a pan like it owed him rent. I sat on the counter and did nothing to help. It was the kindest thing I could do. Houses keep score. Rowans learned our names. By midsummer, the glass stayed open later. Wind moved the curtains like a slow crowd. Light hit the dining table at a kinder angle. At night, the gym light still burned, but not for secrets anymore, for discipline. Helena pretended not to hear the cane in the hall at dawn. This, too, is love. Recovery is a stubborn animal. It does not care about your deadlines or your need for meaning. Rowan limped into it with a patience that made me want to stand up straighter. We added distance the way you add salt, tentative, then a hair more, until finally the soup tastes like itself. Half a lap around the indoor pool, then a full one, then two. The chair became a tool, not a fate. My body remembered how to be mine. I ran short loops on the trail behind the house and did not count anything but breath. I read novels that had nothing to do with healing. I learned the names of the redwoods as if they were neighbors. I wrote to Maribel and pressed leaves into the envelope like proof. On a Wednesday, Rowan said, without looking up from the ridiculous omelet he was attempting, I moved my shares into a trust. I paused with a mug halfway to my mouth. Your trust, ours, he said. Then he glanced up, caught my face, and shook his head. Not the company. I am not handing you a machine you did not ask for. The trust holds what protects it, and it names the people who made sure I still had a self when men with nice watches tried to take it. People, I repeated, because I needed him to say it again. Helena, he said, ticking it off like a grocery. Martinez, who does not let me skip breathwork. You. The lawyer who told me my first app was trash. A beat. I want you in the next thing, Nora. Whatever it is. Not because I owe you, because it will be better with you in it. I did not trust my voice, so I set down the mug and reached for the plate. This omelet is a crime, I said, and he laughed, and the tension left the room like a held breath finally released. He did not propose. He did something stranger, and to me, braver. He handed me a small black box 2 weeks later and said, You do not have to answer this year. Inside lay a ring so simple it felt like a sentence without adjectives. A slim band, a small sapphire that changed color when the light swung. Walk with me, he said. That is the question. Not today, not in a tux. Just walk. I am not saying yes, I told him, sliding it onto my finger anyway, because the metal felt like a promise to myself at least as much as to him. I would be worried if you did, he said, and kissed my forehead like he was grateful to it for existing. I kept working. He kept working. We got better at arguing. We got better at leaving the kitchen the way we found it. The house learned what the sound of our laughter meant and stopped bracing for it. On the private trail, Rowan stopped using the chair altogether in the kind hour before the heat. He walked out of it like a tide leaves a cove, slow, inevitable, no fanfare. One morning, while we were counting steps on the patio, Helena emerged with a look that meant news. She handed me a phone like it had been hissing. There are messages for you, she said, and left us to them. Adrian had texted once, weeks earlier, a tidy pair of lines asking if I was all right. I had not replied. A ghost does not owe you conversation. Now there was a new number I did not recognize, and a voice message from a man who believed his charm was a skeleton key. Ms. Bennett, he began. Lazy vowels, expensive confidence. Gordon Crane, I believe you have documents that concern me. International transfers, harmless things misunderstood by overeager counsel. Let us connect before others get creative. I did the thing that I have learned to do when men ask me to be reasonable. I put the kettle on. Rowan listened with the patient irritation of a man who has had to sit through too many pitches. Crane is a Valmont fixer, he said finally. He cleans what will not stay clean. Evan has been busy. What do you want to do? I asked. Breathe, he said. Then fight. We copied everything that could be copied. We put duplicates where greedy hands could not reach. We told our lawyer to hold one envelope in a safe that does not blink. We showed Helena enough to put that particular fierce light in her eyes. We went to the garden and pulled weeds until both of us remembered why hands exist. Later, when the dark came early and the house made its winter sounds, Rowan set a small wooden box on the table between us. "There is one thing I have not told you," he said. I braced without meaning to. He lifted the lid. Inside, folded into careful quarters, lay a printout of an old email thread, his name, Evans, a Valmont CC, a subject line that made my skin prickle. Succession, not for the company, for him. "He tried to get my medical proxy 6 weeks after the accident," Rowan said, voice level with an effort I could hear. "If Helena had not been what she is, I might have given it to him, because I was tired and he was familiar, and I wanted someone to carry me without asking for my consent each time. He would have sold me like an asset." "And you did not," I said. "And I did not," he agreed. He pushed the box toward me. "I am telling you so you know I know what I almost did. The next time I am that tired, you will make me soup and remind me who I am." "I will," I said. The next board cycle came and went without incident. Evan was very civil in his resignation letter. Laura was a storm in a gray suit filed under other business. Adrian disappeared into the static of rooms I no longer entered. Harborview became a place I could picture without wanting to drown. On Rowan's birthday, we drove up the coast and let the wind take the shape of our conversation. He asked if I thought we could ever be who we were before everything bent. I said I hoped not. The tide ran in. He reached for my hand. We watched a dog invent joy by chasing it. 2 days later, a plain envelope arrived with no return address and a postmark from a city that made my throat close. I opened it at the kitchen island while Rowan's rice did something questionable on the stove. Inside, a single photograph. Adrian in a room I recognized from Valmont press packets, arm looped around a woman who was not Sienna and not Laura. A third sister I had never met. Champagne caught mid-laugh, as if the camera were late to the joke. On the back, in tidy script, "You chose well." No signature. I slid the photo into the drawer where we keep rubber bands and emergency matches. "What do you want to do with that?" Rowan asked. "See it when I need to remember," I said. "Forget it when I do not." He nodded. "Omelette," he said gravely, and I prepared my fork like a soldier. The house sighed, pleased. The redwoods did their evening gesture. The wind laid a palm on the glass and then thought better of it. I was a person in a place where I did not yet know the name for every bird. That was enough. The first storm of autumn arrived the way grief does, without asking for your calendar. Rain pinned itself to the glass. The ravine printed a darker version of itself. The house made new sounds, timber settling and vents humming. Like it, too, was learning a different shape. "Today is inside work," Rowan said, as if the weather had been waiting for his permission. Inside work meant bands and breath, hands and patience. It meant coaxing the muscles that tried to guard him into remembering their other job. It meant watching the small, invisible victories that never make it to the montage. Lactic acid finding an exit. A spasm stopping because the hand on the calf arrived a beat earlier than yesterday. Helena hovered more than usual, a kettle constantly refilling itself. She set a folded note by my elbow and pretended it had always been part of the coaster. "Mail. Do not open alone." Her printing, "Soldier neat." We waited until Rowan was down for a nap, the drug that helps the nerves go quiet finally persuading them. In my suite, we slit the envelope with a butter knife. A single sheet, a single line. "Return what does not belong to you, and we call it even. G. Crane." "Even," Helena said, like she was trying on a new word and finding it did not fit. "They put that in writing." "They think we scare easy," I said, and set the letter under a stack of cookbooks that had never taught Rowan anything except the limits of his patience. "We make more copies." She nodded once, pleased I had the right instinct before she had to suggest it. "There is more," she said, and smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from her skirt. "About me, in case you are keeping a list of where the floor is weak." I looked up. "Helena only told you things when she had decided you were a safe deposit box." "I did 10 years in an army hospital," she said, "then 5 more with the kind of unit that does not have a patch. I am good at holding lines. I am not always good at living inside them. Mr. Vale hired me because I do not rattle. I stayed because he remembers to ask who is feeding me when everyone else forgets I am a person with a mouth." It was the most I had ever heard her say about herself. It rearranged her in my mind. Less inscrutable granite, more old tree with lightning scars. "I am glad you are here," I said. She made a soft harumph that might have been her version of thank you. "Crane will try polite once," she added. "Then he will try loud. Then he will try quiet again. Loud is where people make mistakes." That afternoon, the loud arrived in a pressed suit and a smile. He did not make it past the gate. Helena met him in the drive with a posture so professional it could have been used to iron shirts. "Mr. Crane," she said, "appointments only." "I brought a peace offering," he said, holding up a white bag with a bakery logo people whisper about in this county like it is a password. "Croissants. Return address," she said, nodding to the envelope in his other hand. He faltered, as if he had just discovered that decency required a stamp. She let the silence measure him. He wrote, the gate clicked, and he left with the croissants unaccepted, his courtesy curdled by weather. "He will send someone smaller next," Helena said, re-entering the house. "Men like that subcontract their soul." Rowan laughed, low and honest. "Marry me, Helena," he said, in the way people say it to the person who just saved them 1,000 headaches. "Sir," she said, deadpan, "you are already over your quota." That night, the storm leaned its shoulder harder against the glass. I lay awake and counted breaths that were not mine. In the half-dark, Rowan's door creaked a finger's width. "You awake?" he asked. "Yes, come see something," he said. He rolled ahead of me to the small library behind the gym. The redwood planks smelled like pencil shavings and time. He flipped a switch, and a projector hummed. On the far wall, a video, time-stamped 2 weeks ago. A younger version of me, tired, hair knotted, scrubs wrinkled, standing by the bars while Rowan lifted, set down, lifted again. "You record your own war," I said. "Proof helps," he said. "For me, for later, for the days I forget that the work is not imaginary." "May I keep a copy?" I asked, surprising myself with how much I wanted it. He glanced over, gauging. "I was going to give it to you," he said simply. "Insurance. And because one day we will stand in a kitchen we do not own yet, and the morning will be ordinary, and you will feel like this never happened." It helps to hold the hard thing in your hand and say, "We did that. We did not dream it." I swallowed. "You are getting good at this." "At what?" "At hope that does not make false promises." He made a face like he had bitten a lemon. "Do not promote me yet," he said. "I am still terrible at omelets." We watched a few minutes in silence, the glow washing the books with a pale imitation of daylight. On the screen, my hand floated just off his elbow, not touching, ready. In the room, my hand with its small sapphire did the same. "I know," he said without looking. "I see it too." The rain slowed. The redwoods shook off their wet and went back to standing like guardians around a secret. 2 weeks later, an invitation arrived dressed like a trap. Heavy card, pale ink. Valmont Foundation Autumn Gala, benefiting rehabilitation research. In smaller print, honoring Evan Drake for visionary leadership. "Do not go," Helena said, reading over my shoulder. This is bait in a tuxedo. Rowan took the card, turned it once, set it down. It is also a microphone, he said. One of the few they let people like me use. If we hide, they will tell the story without us. And if you walk into their house, they will try to burn down yours, she countered. He looked at me. What do you think? Fear is a muscle you can teach. We go, I said, but we go as if the floor is slick. Helena sighed, which in her language means consent. Then we write our speech, she said, and we rehearse our exits, and I bring 3 versions of the plan. Valmont events look like money forgot to be shy. The museum's glass atrium held enough gowns to dress a city. Cameras flowered at the edges, long lenses like periscopes. The air smelled like white wine and winter roses and teeth. We did not bring the chair, Rowan insisted. This is not a denial, he said. It is a revelation. If I have to sit, I will sit, but I am going to make them memorize me standing. He wore the midnight suit. I wore a black dress with sleeves and shoes I could run in. Helena wore armor disguised as silk and an earpiece the color of her skin. At the entrance, a Valmont sister smiled the way a cat does when it has already eaten. Nora, she said, like we were old acquaintances. Laura, tonight in silver. And Mr. Vale, how brave. We prefer effective, Rowan said, and moved us forward. The speeches were an education in how rich people talk about hardship. Words like journey and resilience were used as if they had been personally patented. Evan accepted his glass plaque with a smile that practiced its angles. This is about partnership, he said. No one heals alone. Except the people we cut loose, I muttered, and Helena's earpiece crackled with a tiny laugh. After, the donor crowd swelled, a tide of congratulations and questions like disguised knives. It took less than 10 minutes for me to feel the gaze on the back of my neck. That is a Valmont trick too, making the room feel choreographed around you. I turned. Adrian stood 10 feet away, hand in his pocket, glass in his other hand, looking like a man who had found a way to exist as a reflection of other people's light. For a second, my body tried to remember an old panic. Then my mind reminded it that panic is a choice with an exit door. He approached, that terrible half-smile he used when he planned to be forgiven already in place. Nora, he said, softly, like the word itself might save him. You look strange to see outside a cafe, I said. He reddened. I wanted to say, no, I said. You wanted to feel better. He blinked. The fragile part of me that used to tend other people's guilt stirred and then went back to sleep. Rowan appeared at my side with a timing that would have made Helena proud. He nodded at Adrian as if he were acknowledging a chair. Excuse us, he said. We have to go decide which sponsors get to keep their plaque. We moved. Not away from the stage, but toward the small media scrum near the press wall, where a local journalist with kind eyes was interviewing honorees. 2 minutes, Helena's voice came through the tiny bud in my ear. On your mark. Rowan did not wait to be called. He waited for the exact second the mic went unattended, a lull between gratitude and vanity. Then he stepped forward and raised his hand. I will be quick, he said, voice steady enough to quiet the orbiting conversations. I am Rowan Vale. A year ago, I could not take 3 steps without help. Tonight, I took more. Not because of the generosity of people who write checks and come to parties, though that matters, but because someone told me the truth when I wanted the lie. Because people who do not put their names on buildings showed up at 5 in the morning and did the work with me. I am here to say, do not confuse ownership with authorship. If your name is on a plaque, great. If your hand is on the bar at dawn, you get to talk. A startled hush. A smattering of honest claps. A camera light turned our way. And, he added, mild as rain, If a partner ever asks you to sign your spine away while you are learning how to use your feet, say no, even if his watch is expensive." He handed the mic back before anyone could decide whether to be insulted or enlightened. Helena's "exit, exit" in my ear was unnecessary. We were already walking. Outside, the air felt colder, freer. "You made new enemies," Helena said, the way a gardener remarks on the arrival of rain. "Good," Rowan said. "We will stop wondering where they are." In the car, we let the adrenaline leave us in waves. I took off my shoes and put my feet on the seat and did not apologize for the dirt. Rowan leaned his head back and blew out a breath that sounded like relief's older cousin. "I saw him," he said after a minute. "I know," I said. "You did not shake," he observed. "I learned," I said, "how to stand." "You teach me," he said. We watched the city lights tilt by, small squares of borrowed sun. Back at the house, a package sat inside the gate, neat as a white lie, no return label. Helena scanned it with something that looked like it belongs to spies. It beeped the right way. She opened it with the caution of a person who expects bad gifts. Inside, a thick envelope. Inside that, copies, contracts, emails, screenshots. A post-it in a hand I recognized from a lifetime ago. They do this to everyone. M. M? Helena asked. An ex-friend, I said. Maybe a decent one now. Rowan flipped through the pages, his face sharpening. This is their playbook, he said. Not just for me, for 3 other companies. Same clauses, same shell, same charity circuit. We stop thinking this is personal, Helena said. We make it professional. I scanned, my nurse brain tagging dates, names, red flags. I felt a strange, clean heat, like right anger, the kind that wakes you up. We have enough to go to the state, I said. We will, Rowan said, after we tuck our house in. He pressed his palm flat to the table as if blessing it. The house, for its part, seemed to approve. We made an odd war room, a founder with a cane, a nurse with a foster kid's appetite for fairness, and a former military administrator who could make a spreadsheet salute. We called ourselves nothing. We called the lawyer. We called the investigator who had once taught Helena how to spot forged signatures by the way the ink sits on fiber. We do not take this to the press first, Helena said. We take it to the people who can bless our receipts. Receipts we had. Contracts that sang when read aloud. Emails that thought they were private jokes. Wire logs braided to hospital admission dates. The kind of coincidence that invites handcuffs. In between law and logistics, life persisted. Maribel sent a box of cookies that traveled badly and tasted perfect anyway. She tucked a note under the top layer. Mi niña, if you need me to come stand in a corner and look mean, I have Thursdays. I cried for a minute in the pantry and came out with sugar on my face I did not bother to wipe off. Rowan added a new thing to our mornings. After the bands and the bars and the breath, we sat for 2 minutes with eyes closed. Name 3 things you can feel, he said. 3 you can hear. 3 you can smell. This is hokey, I told him. This saved me, he said simply, when my brain tried to eat itself. So I did it. The chair under my thighs. The lemon in the air from last night's cleaning. The hum in the wall that says the house is alive. My own breath. His. The rain far off. Reality reasserted itself, patient and kind. I stopped grinding my teeth at night. The investigator came back with a simple, devastating sentence. They have done this at least 4 times, she said. 2 companies folded quietly. 1 fought and bled out. You are the outlier because you had someone who said, in the room, do not sign. Someone, Rowan said, and looked at me like a thank you, and I looked away because my face would have ruined the moment with softness. On a pale Monday, we went to the state attorney's office with a box that could have been a baby or a bomb. The conference room was wood and seal and glass. The assistant attorney general wore a suit that fit and a mind that did not let you waste her time. You are asking me, she said after an hour, to believe that a storied capital firm and a rising partner attempted to steal control of your company while you were incapacitated. No, Rowan said. We are asking you to believe what their paperwork already says. We are simply drawing your attention to the verbs. She smiled at that without meaning to. We will review, she said. We will be in touch. Please do not take this to the press for at least 2 weeks. 2 weeks, Helena said when we were back in the car. They are either going to work or they are going to wait us out. In 2 weeks, I can do 10 more steps, Rowan said. We will not be waiting. We were not. We launched the other part of the plan, the one that builds instead of burns. Rowan had an idea he refused to call a company yet. A quiet platform for rehab communities that do not get film crews, peer-to-peer protocols, rural clinics with no budgets, a repository of what works that lives on phones older than mine. I want it to be ugly and unstoppable, he said. I want it to be a thing nurses like you can use without asking anyone's permission. It will not pay, Helena warned. It is not supposed to, Rowan said. This is the place I pay back. We called it palms, because hands, because help, because the trees outside our windows survived wind by being both strong and flexible. We built at the kitchen table. We tested in the gym. We asked the physical therapist who texts me memes at midnight to break it, and he did, and we made it better. At night, when the house had done its creaks and snores and the ravine had made its own dark, I lay awake and took inventory of the girl I had been in that cafe. She felt far away and also tender close, like a version of me whose bravery I now understood. She did the hardest thing. She walked out. Every step since had been paid forward by that one. The call from the state came sooner than expected. We would like to meet again, the Assistant Attorney General said, voice very even. We have some follow-up, and you should know, Counsel for Valmont Capital has requested a call with our office. Do not be alarmed if a reporter calls you. Do not answer. We can protect your materials, but we cannot bar whispers. We hung up and did what we do now when a wave builds. We set the kettle. We sat out on the patio in the last light where the redwoods look invented. Rowan reached for my hand without looking and laced our fingers. I keep thinking, he said quietly, about the first night you opened that gym door. You yelled at me, I said. I did, he said. And you stayed. I did, I said. Stay, he said, like a vow. And the house breathed in, and the wind did not rattle the glass, and the ravine kept its secrets the way friends do. The first reporter called on a Tuesday, which felt rude, like a stranger opening your fridge. I let it go to voicemail as instructed. The second texted. The third showed up outside the gates with a cameraman and a trench coat that thought it was a personality. Helena met them with a clipboard and a phrase so dry it could have absorbed the fog. No comment while regulatory review is ongoing. Please send written questions to counsel. The trench coat tried charm, tried outrage, tried the oldest trick of all, pretending we would look suspicious if we did not speak. Helena's eyebrow answered for us. Inside, we rehearsed another kind of speaking. The Assistant Attorney General had asked Rowan to prepare a recorded statement for the file. Clear, linear, no ornament. It was the opposite of a gala mic grab. It required precision. It required restraint. We filmed in the small library with the projector dark and the redwoods as the backdrop. Rowan wore no tie. I sat just out of frame with a legal pad that had exactly 3 words at the top: dates, verbs, names. He began, voice steady, hands folded. I am Rowan Vale, he said. On a winter morning, I signed a consent form with a shaking hand so a surgeon could enter my spine. On a spring afternoon, a partner I trusted asked me to sign something else while that hand was still learning the difference between pain and effort. I did not. This is what happened next. He spoke for 6 minutes without a single extra breath. When he finished, Even Helena's stoic mouth softened. "It will do," she said. In Helena, that's confetti. We saved the file in 3 places, printed it, dated it, logged it. The house hummed. Appliances, ducts, the low electric purr of a building awake. And I thought about how many quiet machines had kept us alive this year. That night, while Rowan slept, I pulled a storage bin from the top of my closet. Not the one with winter sweaters, the other one, the Life Before box. Rent receipts from 4 addresses, a postcard from Lila with a doodled halo over a coffee stain, a photo of me and Maribel in paper crowns at a cheap Chinese restaurant after a double shift, our cheeks shiny with exhaustion and soup. Underneath, the slip of paper that had sent me here in the first place, Helena's neat script, a number, a time, a door. I held it like a talisman and then slid it back in place. The past, accounted for. The present, enough. By Thursday, the quiet threats learned volume. A letter from Valmont Council arrived by courier, full of decorative words that tried to dress up a simple proposition. Withdraw your materials. Accept a confidential settlement. Stop being inconvenient. We read it at the kitchen table, the same table where Elena had taught me to fold dough in a way that made bread. I could hear Lila in my head. If it feels like hush money, it's hush money. Rowan looked at Helena. She looked at me. I looked at the redwoods and imagined them as jurors. "We decline," I said. Rowan took out a pen. "We decline," he wrote, and returned the letter with a cover note so brief it felt like a door closing. "After loud comes quiet," Helena reminded us. "After quiet comes something with teeth." The thing with teeth arrived at dawn 3 days later. Not men in suits, someone cheaper. A shadow at the side gate. The scrape of metal on metal, a low curse when the lock refused to perform. The camera caught a slim figure, hood up, hands quick. The alarm chirped once, a sound like a bird clearing its throat, and Helena was already down the stairs with a flashlight that could have doubled as a baton. "Police," she said, and the shadow darted into the fog. 30 minutes later, a patrol car rolled past our drive slow enough to be insulting. An officer took a statement he had already decided not to care about. "Make a note," Helena said afterward. "Not for them, for us. Patterns." We sat in the living room with the curtains open and pretended the morning was normal. Rowan poured coffee. I watched steam rise and thought of all the ways heat escapes if you do not drink while it is still yours. "Do you want to call Maribel?" Rowan asked. "I want to ask her about the stubborn orchid," I said. "And then I want to hear her tell me to eat breakfast like it is the point of the day." We did. She answered on the second ring and scolded me for letting fear take my appetite, and then told us a story about a patient who had named his IV pole after his ex-wife. By the end, our breathing was slower. We ate eggs. We made the beds. We did the boring work that keeps a life from unraveling while you are out there stitching it to something bigger. The Assistant Attorney General called at noon. "We've opened a formal inquiry," she said without preamble. "Do not celebrate. Do not speak to anyone not named on the engagement letter. And Miss Novak?" "Yes?" "Eat," she said. "This will take time." I laughed and then, to my own surprise, cried a little right there next to the fridge. Rowan leaned his hip against the counter and handed me a napkin without making it a scene. That afternoon, the ravine held fog like a secret. We walked the lower path, Rowan with his cane, me matching my pace to his. We said almost nothing until we reached the bent cedar where we usually turned back. There, he stopped, lifted his eyes, and let out a breath that seemed to come from a place deeper than lungs. "What?" I asked. "I used to think power was applause," he said, "or market share, or that terrible word, leverage." He touched the rough bark. "Today, I think it is the ability to keep walking when other people would like you to turn around." "Also, leverage is a physical therapy concept," I said deadpan. "We have reclaimed it." He laughed. It sounded like a hinge oiled after a winter. When we got home, Helena had already printed the police incident report, attached the gate camera still, and added it to a new tab in the binder labeled Security Attempts. She slid the binder into the drawer reserved for living documents. Above it, the bread was rising under a towel. We were building a life inside a siege. It should have felt impossible. It felt like clarity. I did not plan to call Lila's mother, but grief is a homing device. It brings you back to the door you have avoided. On a rainless afternoon when the light made everything too honest, I dialed the number I had not used since the funeral. "Hello?" a wary voice answered. "Mrs. Ortiz? It's Nora." A pause that carried 100 shared memories and a season of silence. "Mija," she said finally, and I had to sit down on the kitchen floor so the softness of it would not knock me over. "You took too long." "I did," I said. "I'm sorry. We talked for an hour. She told me about the neighbor's cat that had adopted her porch. I told her about a house that breathes and a man who cares too much and hides it poorly. We did not say Lila's name at first. Then we did, and it did not break anything. It stitched. "Are you safe?" she asked, and it was not small talk. "I am," I said, and meant it. "And stubborn." "She always liked that about you," Mrs. Ortiz said, even when it made her crazy. Before we hung up, she added, "When you have time, come for arroz con pollo. Bring your soldier woman. She sounds like she eats like a bird." I promised. I would keep that promise. That night, Helena found me sitting on the steps with the cordless pressed to my chest like a relic. She did not ask. She sat 2 steps down and told me about the time her unit cooked dinner in a barracks hallway with 2 camp stoves and a contraband bag of saffron. "Food is how you end a day without bringing it to bed," she said. "Wash the pots, wash the mind." We washed the pots. We slept like people who had earned it. The next morning, a different call. A number I recognized and did not. Adrian. I let it ring. He texted instead. "I want to apologize in person." I stared at the tiny screen and at the part of me that still wanted to dignify a performance with attendance. Then I typed the only words that ensured my own spine. "No, be well." He replied with a paragraph. I did not read it. I deleted the thread. Not because I was strong, because I had built the habit of not hurting myself. 2 days later, the state's request for documents multiplied into a list long enough to make an honest person nervous. Helena created a war calendar. I built a checklist that would have made my nursing instructors proud. Rowan drafted a narrative that read like a patient history: onset, course, interventions, response. "Fault lines," he said as we traced dates. Eric stepped on every one. Here, here, and here. "Laura provided the scaffolding," I said, drawing a line where charity invitations coincided with board votes. "Gordon curved the edges so it would look like opportunity instead of a funnel." He looked over at me, eyes narrowed with interest. "When this is over," he said, "you could run a forensic unit for nonprofits." "When this is over," I said, "I might want to sit still for a minute and watch light." "Then we will do both," he said, as if time were obedient. On Sunday, we drove down to the city to see Maribel. The apartment building had potted plants that someone actually remembered to water and a bulletin board full of church fish fries and toddlers selling lemonade for soccer uniforms. She greeted us with a flour-dusted apron and the kind of hug you cannot fake. "You brought him," she said to me, fake scolding. "Good. I want to see if he knows how to eat." Rowan, to his credit, let himself be fussed over like a nephew. He listened to Maribel's gossip about everyone's gallbladder as if it were political analysis. He washed the dishes without being asked. He laughed at the right place in the story about the priest and the custodian and the lost keys. On the drive back, Rowan said, "The first time I spoke in public after the accident, I did not look at the audience. Tonight I did. And it was 3 people and a plant, and I still almost fainted." "You did great," I said. "I realized something," he continued. "I keep thinking I need to get back to who I was, but the person who can sit at Maribel's table and not check his phone every 60 seconds, that guy did not exist before. Keep him," I said. "I will," he said, and he did not laugh. Back at the house, a bouquet waited on the porch. White lilies, a florist's idea of apology. No card. The smell was too much, too church. Helena carried them to the compost without comment. At midnight, the phone rang with the kind of insistence that means hospital or trouble. The Assistant Attorney General's number. "We've received a motion from Valmont Council," she said, voice even. "They're seeking an injunction to prevent you from transferring any assets or making public statements." It's aggressive. "What do you need?" Rowan asked. "Affidavits, and the list of board members who've been contacted this week by anyone in their orbit." "We have it," Helena said over his shoulder. "Of course we did." "Good," the attorney said. "Mr. Vale, Miss Novak, do not scare easily. It encourages them." Afterward, the house felt too awake. I curled on the long sofa with my knees under a blanket Helena pretends she did not knit. Rowan sat at the other end and stared at the dark window like it might talk back. "Do you want to sleep?" I asked. "I want to not be a headline," he said. "Then let us be a footnote," I said. "Those outlast everything." He smiled, small and grateful. We fell asleep like that, not touching, but aligned, a geometry learned by people who have been cold and found a way to share heat without bursting into flame. The courthouse downtown always smells like paper and childhood mistrust. Our hearing landed on a Wednesday that began with fog and ended with a bruise-colored sunset. Helena wore navy and a pin I had not seen before, a tiny sparrow. Rowan wore the midnight suit. I wore resolve, disguised as a dress. Outside the courtroom, Laura stood surrounded by suits. Evan murmured to a reporter with a mannered humility he had probably practiced in front of mirrors. Eric pretended to be on his phone and looked up every 6 seconds to check who was looking at him. Gordon did not appear. Men like that prefer other people's hands. We did not cluster. We practiced a different strategy: oxygen. We took up our small square of air and breathed it. Inside, the judge was concise, the way people are when they have already read everything and do not want to hear your performance. Valmont Council opened with a polished apocalypse. We were defaming a venerable institution. We were sabotaging charity. We were endangering jobs. Our attorney, a woman with calm wrists and a mind like a scalpel, answered with exhibits and verbs. "Intent," she said, and laid the emails down like breadcrumbs back to a wolf's door. "Pattern," she said, and set 4 near-identical term sheets side by side. "Timing," she added, and pointed to the recovery logs, the therapy schedule, the request for signatures during sedation. The judge's pen stopped moving. Rowan was called. He stood at the lectern, cane quiet, and did what rehab had taught him: 1 step, 1 breath, 1 sentence at a time. He did not perform. He did not pity himself. He told the truth like a person telling you where the fire exits are. Valmont's counsel tried to make him confess to bitterness, to vengeance, to greed. "Isn't it true," the attorney asked, "that you were incapable of leading your company at the time, and Mr. Drake was protecting its interests?" "I was incapable of walking," Rowan said. "I was not incapable of reading." A ripple moved through the gallery like agreement disguised as a cough. The attorney pivoted to me. "Miss Novak," he said, "what are your qualifications for corporate assessment?" "I am a nurse," I said. "Exactly," he said, triumphant. "No training in governance." "No," I said. "My training is in triage. You walk into a mess and figure out who is dying. You decide what matters in under 1 minute, and you do not blink." When I saw the documents, I recognized shock, and then I followed the blood. A small sound from the back. Someone tried not to laugh and failed. The judge's mouth almost smiled. Almost. Laura took the stand and did what her world rewards. She sounded plausible. She framed everything as philanthropy, as stewardship, as a daughter's duty. Her lawyer asked soft questions. Ours asked the other kind. "Ms. Valmont," counsel said, "can you explain why the same shell company received options in 3 separate firms chaired by men who had recently suffered medical crises?" Laura did not flinch. "We invest in resilience," she said. "That often brings us near tragedy." "Or opportunity," our counsel said. The judge took it under advisement, which is law for "see you soon." No injunction, no gag. Not yet. Outside, cameras blinked awake. Helena steered us through with the grace of a ballroom general. We did not speak. We did not stop. Back in the car, I exhaled so hard I got lightheaded. "You were good," Rowan said. "I wanted to throw a shoe," I said. "Save it for when it will be useful," Helena advised. We drove home in silence. The redwoods held up the last light like offerings. The house welcomed us like a dog trying not to jump. On the kitchen island, a basket from the neighbor whose name I still could not remember. Eggs. Lemons. A note that said in shaky cursive, "Keep going." I pressed the lemon to my nose and almost cried again. That night, Rowan and I walked to the gym. Not to fight. To say thank you. To the bars, to the bands, to the mirror that had taught him how to endure looking. He put both hands on the steel and bowed his head like the kind of prayer I believe in. Effort, gratitude, repeat. "Tomorrow," he said, "Palms launches beta to 5 clinics." "Tomorrow," I echoed. "And in a week, if the judge likes verbs, we may get a green light to open the rest of the file." "If she does not," I said, "we open it anyway, one hand at a time." He looked at me then with an expression I had not seen on his face since this began. Something like peace, but earned. "If I had known," he said softly, "that the person waiting at the end of the worst corridor in my life would be you, I might have run toward it." "Do not romanticize suffering," I said, "because old training dies hard, and because caution is another kind of care. We got lucky. Now we do not waste it." He nodded. "Deal." We turned off the lights. The house exhaled. The ravine kept watch. The night did what it does, made all the edges honest. Morning arrived like a held breath finally released. No fog, no sirens, just the thin blue of a sky that had decided to cooperate. We were up before sunrise, the house moving in quiet choreography. Helena at the long table arranging packets, me checking the Palms tablets one by one, Rowan pacing the kitchen in slow, determined laps to keep nerves from stealing his balance. 5 pilot clinics, I said, tapping the last screen. 1 in Humboldt, 1 in Santa Rosa, 1 in the Central Valley, 2 in the city. All preloaded, all anonymized, all with the consent scripts front and center. Rowan nodded. "No hagiography," he murmured, "just tools that work." He dialed into the first call like a surgeon washing hands. Ritual, focus, no wasted motion. On the big wall display, the clinic team appeared, a lead therapist with crow's feet etched by mercy, a physician with a braid down her back, 2 aides who looked young enough to still believe in impossible things. Rowan walked them through calibration. I demoed the caregiver prompts and the red flag escalation. Helena watched, timing with the concentration of a bomb tech. When it worked, when the pelvic tilt cue triggered exactly as designed and the patient on their end adjusted with a tiny, miraculous shift, the room changed. Not theatrically, not even loudly, just a quiet collective loosening, the way a body lets go when the pain backs off for a minute. "Again," the therapist said. We did it again. 4 more clinics, 4 more sets of hands and hopes and fluorescent lights. 1 connection froze. Helena had already shipped a backup. 1 caregiver cried mid-call. I told her to drink water and sit for 30 seconds. 1 patient cracked a joke about robot legs. Rowan laughed like the ocean at low tide, patient and sure. By early afternoon, we had something better than a launch. We had first proof. "Eat," Helena ordered, depositing bowls of soup that tasted like garlic, sun, and staying alive. We obeyed. The second half of the day belonged to law. Our counsel arrived in a Navy suit that had seen worse fights and set up at the dining table, turning our home into a conference room with 4 folders and a teapot. "The judge liked your verbs," she said dryly. "The injunction request is denied. Discovery proceeds. You will be asked for more than is reasonable. Give them exactly as much as is required." "And Valmont?" Rowan asked. Drafting a statement, counsel replied. Measured, vaguely wounded, meant for donors. Ignore it publicly. Privately, we collect. She slid a fresh list across the table. Emails from Evan's assistant, calendar entries from Laura's private account, the Shell's bank trail. Helena already had the scanner humming. I opened my laptop and made a new tab in our matrix. Donor theater versus paper truth. If this was going to be a chess match, we would play it like a clinic. Assess, prioritize, act, reassess, repeat. Late afternoon, the doorbell rang with the particular insistence of an old friend who knows your coffee order. Maribel. She breezed in with empanadas and 2 containers of arroz con pollo like a saint with Tupperware. For the fighters, she said, and for that soldier who is too thin. Helena pretended offense. I am aerodynamic. Eat aerodynamic, Maribel said, and kissed her on the temple. We sat at the counter with paper plates and the kind of laughter that refuses to ask permission. Rowan took exactly 1 bite and went still. This, he said reverently, is proof there's a benevolent force organizing the universe. Mi arroz is not a theology, Maribel said, but it helps the spirit tell the body to keep going. When she left, she pressed a small basil plant into my hands. For your window, she said. Alive things belong near you. As evening edged the redwoods purple, Rowan and I took the path to the lower clearing. He leaned on the cane less than the week before. I let my stride be the weather he could count on, steady, warm, no surprises. At the bent cedar we stopped and listened to nothing in particular. Sometimes victory sounds like quiet. Back inside, a message waited from the Assistant Attorney General. Expect a flurry. Do not confuse volume with power. See you Friday. Rowan tapped his cane once on the floor, like a captain on deck. We are not the flurry, he said. We are the weather. Then let's keep the barometer honest, I said, and set 3 alarms. 1 for stretching, 1 for documents, 1 for sleep. Sleep, that elusive ally, came like a cat, only after we pretended not to need it. The invitation arrived on linen thicker than some of the towels in this house. Valmont's annual winter gala, benefiting resilience initiatives. Dress code, formal. Tone, smug. They expect you to stay home and nurse your resentment, Helena said, flipping the envelope like a playing card. Which is why we should consider not doing that. Rowan tilted his head. Crash the orchestra? Attend, Helena corrected. Legally, quietly, not as scandal, as presence. My stomach did its old stunt double trick. Drop, climb, spin. The idea of walking into that room made my skin feel like the wrong size. But the practical part of me, the nurse, the foster kid who learned how to read the room before the room read her, understood the value. Sometimes you go to the wolf's dinner to count teeth. We prepared like professionals, not avengers. Our council secured 3 tickets via a friendly donor who believed in actual resilience. Helena diagrammed the floor from last year's seating chart and highlighted choke points. Rowan practiced stairs with the cane until he could navigate 3 steps with no drama. I found a dress that did not look like a dare, and shoes that would not betray me. The basil plant on the sill put out a new leaf the morning we left. I took it as a blessing from the ordinary. The hotel ballroom glowed the way money glows when it wants to look like benevolence. Glass, gold, women in gowns cool enough to double as weather systems. Men in tuxedos that whispered the names of Italian grandfathers. A string quartet played a song that had been designed to make donors feel generous about themselves. We entered as if invited, because we were. Eyes landed on us like heat-seeking things. I saw Laura near the dais in a metallic shade of forgiveness. Evan orated to a semicircle of men nodding at their own reflections. Eric hovered with the anxious energy of a man deciding between flight and performance. And to my left, of all ghosts, Adrian. He froze. His face did the thing it did the first time I saw a code blue. Panic disguised as protocol. "Nora," he said, because syllables can be a rope, and some men throw ropes when they feel the floor tilt. I look busy," I said pleasantly. "Enjoy the evening, Adrian." He opened his mouth to say the speech titled, "I have regrets, but they are really compliments to myself." I turned my head toward Helena, who had already interposed a shoulder as smooth as a wall. He retreated. Some doors you close with manners. We moved as a unit, not hunting, not hiding, present. When donors approached Rowan, he spoke about outcomes, not drama. When a board member tried to corner me with a philanthropic koan, why must reform always be so adversarial? I told her about a teenager who learned to sit again by counting tiles because no one in her county had a better tool. The board member blinked twice and said she would like to see a demo. Laura took the stage halfway through the second course, a study in contained radiance. She spoke about legacy, about fathers, about the duty of those with much to lift those with less. It was a speech designed by a small committee to make checks larger. She almost made me believe her, which is her best magic trick. Then she said the line that cracked her glitter. "Our foundation champions the unsung." On the screen behind her, a slide flashed. 3 logos of companies saved by Valmont guidance. In the lower corner, for exactly a heartbeat, the Shell company's name appeared, small, italic, the way roaches are small in kitchens until you turn the light on. Helena's hand brushed my wrist. She had seen it too. After the applause, after the auctioneer's voice did its money hypnosis, after half the room had tied virtue around their shoulders like capes, we made our quiet exit. In the cool of the parking level, I breathed for the first time in an hour. Rowan leaned his head back against the seat. "I did not throw a canapé," he said. "You exercised restraint," Helena translated. I, however, stole a seating map. Back home, we froze the gala live stream and captured the slide in high resolution. Our counsel called it a delicious, unforced error. The Assistant Attorney General called it an inadvertent admission embedded in marketing. Either way, the teeth we had counted at dinner now had a photograph. At midnight, I sat on the floor in my dress next to the basil plant and ate leftover empanadas with my fingers. Rowan sat beside me and unlaced his shoes like a person who had earned bed. "How did you not set the room on fire?" he asked. "I carried water," I said. Also, Helena glared at me from across 5 tables every time I looked flammable. He grinned, and some of the ballroom's fake light burned off his face. We slept like people who had won nothing yet and still deserved rest. The next weeks were the kind they do not write songs about. Call, scan, staple, repeat. The case matured like winter citrus, sun-starved, slow, still somehow sweet. The beta expanded to 10 clinics. We learned more from one physical therapist's blunt note than from 5 polished panels. Helena replaced the porch bulb and the gate motor in under an hour. Ordinary miracles, the kind that keep a siege from turning into a religion of complaint. In the middle of it, a letter from the court. The judge scheduled a settlement conference. Valmont had asked. Our counsel verified. Twice. They would like to buy a future in which they did not do this, she said, wrapped in language about collaboration. We met in a federal conference room that looked like every conference room built by a government trying to be neutral. No art. A plant that had never been outside. A clock that ticked loud enough to be a third party. Laura arrived with counsel and perfume you could mistake for sincerity. Evan came without the smile. Eric stared at his water like it might absolve him if he could just finish it. Gordon did not attend. Men who own shadows rarely sit in fluorescent. The magistrate judge, a woman whose cardigan hid a core of steel, explained the rules. Then she asked each side to state briefly what they wanted. Accountability, our counsel said. Structural change. An end to the shell game. Closure, Valmont counsel offered. A chance to move forward together. The judge separated us into rooms as if we were quarreling cousins at a wedding. Shuttle diplomacy commenced. Offers arrived wearing polite clothing. Funds for clinics, a seat on an advisory board, a joint press release about shared values. They were designed to make us look unreasonable if we said no. We said no. Counteroffers went back. Admit to the structure. Dissolve the shell. Return the diverted options to the original companies. Publish new governance that posts conflicts in real time. Seed a public interest fund that cannot be controlled by any single name. Hours passed. The clock accomplished its mission. The plant remained green. We stretched. We did not fidget where eyes could see. Near evening, the door opened and Laura herself stepped in, against protocol. For a heartbeat, the room smelled like expensive regret. "You could destroy us," she said quietly, and there was no audience to reward the performance. "We do not want to destroy," Rowan said. "We want to irrigate." She worked her jaw like the truth was a fruit with a tough skin. "If we concede to all of this, my father will never forgive me." "If you do not," I said, "the court will not forgive you." Measured slowly, in public, over years. Choose your heat. Her eyes flicked to me, taking in the dress I had replaced with jeans, the basil plant stain still on my thumb from pinching flowers that morning. "Who are you to him?" she asked. It was not envy, it was anthropology. "The person who sits in the room when the men leave," I said. "The one who watches the hands." She nodded once. "I underestimated you." "I prefer it that way," I said, "because some habits are useful." She left. The judge returned. Terms sharpened, paper appeared. We wrote our names where names belong. The shell would dissolve within 30 days. The options would flow home. The governance would be public. The fund would seed $5 million in real money to places that counted bodies, not galas. No admissions of guilt, because law is an altar that worships the right words. But the work would change, because we had bent the hinge. On the way out, in the corridor with gum under the bench, Eric tried one last time to make himself the protagonist. "You won," he said to Rowan, half acid, half awe. "Happy?" "I am functional," Rowan said. "That is enough." Eric looked at me as if hoping I would mediate the shame. I looked back as if he were a folder to be filed. He dropped his gaze. Paper wins, in the end. It always does. Back home, the Redwoods received our small triumph with their usual impassive grace. Helena placed the signed copies in the living drawer. Maribel arrived with a cake that could have ended arguments in foreign parliaments. We ate it in the kitchen with forks and a shameful level of speed. Rowan leaned his cane against the counter and took a breath the length of a winter. "What now?" he asked. "Now," Helena said, "you do the boring thing that makes the dramatic thing worth it. You implement. Now," I added, "you write the letter to every clinic you will never meet and tell them this is not a miracle and it is not charity. It is a tool. Use it." He nodded. Later, in the small library with the projector dark and the basil plant grinning on the sill, he wrote. His hands did not tremble. That night, I dreamed of the parallel bars in the gym, empty, sunlight on steel. In the dream, I was not holding anyone up. I was walking between them, alone. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to remember what balance feels like when you are not calculating it. I woke before dawn. The house breathed. The ravine kept its quiet promise. I lay there with my hand on my own heart, counting. Not to check for disaster, to praise the ordinary drum that meant, still here. We did not throw a party when the dissolution notice for the shell posted on the state website. We did not open champagne or write a speech. We went to the farmer's market and bought tomatoes that tasted like red and peaches that tasted like the part of summer that forgives you for winter. Helena haggled over eggs like a general negotiating a ceasefire. Rowan carried the bags and pretended not to be proud of the weight. At home, I wrote a message to Mrs. Ortiz with a photo of the basil plant that had outgrown its pot. Dinner next week?" She replied with a heart and 4 exclamation points and a shopping list disguised as hospitality. In the afternoon, we drove 2 hours north to a clinic with fluorescent buzz and a physical therapist who wore her hair in a coil that looked like determination. Her patient, a woman my age with a laugh like a bell, put on the palm's cuffs with the boredom of someone who had tested 7 technologies and learned disappointment's address by rote. 10 minutes in, she paused and looked up like a person who had heard her name called from the right room. "Again," she said. "Again." The best word, the long yes. On the way back, the sun stood low behind the trees, a coin you could never spend, only admire. Rowan reached across the console and found my hand by habit. Not a declaration, a check-in, a pulse. "You kept your promise," he said quietly. "No illusions." "And you kept yours," I said. "No pity." We did not believe in neat endings. The world remains itself, messy, loud, sometimes cruel. But that day the hinge we had pushed swung wide enough to let a line of ordinary people through. Therapists and aides and patients, and the stubborn, unsung caregivers who will never stand at a podium and who do not want to. We ate tomatoes with salt for dinner and watched a movie with exactly 2 car chases and a dog who lived. Maddie-Belle texted a picture of a flan that should be illegal. Helena fell asleep in her chair with a book on her chest and her glasses crooked. I left her there and covered her with the couch throw she pretends she hates. Later, under the window where the basil had become a small jungle, Rowan pressed a small box into my palm. Not velvet, the world had ruined velvet for me. Plain wood, smooth from someone's careful hand. "Open," he said. Inside, a ring. Not a commandment, a circle built of tiny hammered links, each one a day we did not quit, joined with a clasp I could open by myself. "It can be a promise," he said, "or it can be a thing you wear because it's beautiful and you earned beautiful things." "I'll wear it," I said, slipping it on and feeling nothing like ownership and everything like home. "We'll decide the rest the way we do everything." "Slowly," he said. "On purpose," I said. The ravine breathed. The basil scented the dark. Somewhere in town a band practiced and missed a note and laughed and tried again. We slept without armor. In the morning, the sun rose like it had no choice. We pinned the day to the line with clothespins and let it dry.